Well, part two of my little video bringing people up to date on the Ukraine, and I'd just like to take it a little bit further. I've talked about why it started, how it started, uh, what's transpiring now from a military perspective, and of course, those of you who have seen my interviews with Colonel Doug McGregor, who's a very serious expert in modern warfare of this particular kind. I think you'll find you learn a lot. I certainly did. I know that I'm a little bit out of date when it comes to warfare. Many, many years ago since I served with 4th Armoured Division. That was back in the 60s and 70s, and things have really seriously moved on. Leaving all that aside, we are now, as it seeps through very slowly, beginning to realise in high places that it is highly likely that the Ukraine is going to lose the war. It comes as no surprise to me, of course, or those people who have had any form of serious military strategic training. But this is going to happen, and I think people are beginning to realise that. And so there is a group of what I would call psychopaths in both London and Washington who are wanting to involve NATO in a much bigger war and to take part of it physically instead of by proxy in the Ukraine. This can only lead, in my view, to World War III, which is difficult for me to believe that anybody wants, even those who wave their little blue and yellow flags, who know very little about this campaign at all, but they support it. I'm afraid in Britain they like to wave their flags a bit like it was a football match. A football team, and it's Aston Villa or it's Nottingham Forest or whatever it is. It isn't like that. Warfare is bad. Hundreds of thousands of people die, and if it turns into a world war, that will be even worse. So let's all focus our minds on that. We don't want a world war. And sooner or later, we're going to have to accept the situation on the ground as it is and avoid that scenario. Now, we can't involve ourselves anyway, even if we wanted to. And this is the trouble, that those people who are advocating that we do have no training in either military strategy or even modern battlefield tactics. We have Boris Johnson running around the world trying to stoke up enthusiasm for a full head-on NATO war with no experience, of course, militarily whatsoever, and some rather junior officers who haven't had the benefit of strategic training like Staff College, RCDS, or Joint Service Staff Colleging, banging the jingoistic drum because I think they're being wound up by whichever powers are making money out of this war. And make no mistake about it, a lot of people are making a lot of money out of this war. And I did a video earlier about how do all these relatively humble politicians go into politics and come out multimillionaires. There's billions of pounds sloshing around and billions of dollars in the Ukraine sloshing around. And I think you'll find one day we might find out that a number of people have got their hand in the till, leaving that aside. Now, when I was at college getting my training in strategy, geopolitical military strategy, I came up... one of my tutors who rejoiced in the name of Mungo Melvin, General Mungo Melvin. It's a smashing name, isn't it? And he's what is generally referred to as a scholar soldier or soldier scholar, as is Colonel Douglas McGregor. They're soldiers, but they're also academics, if you will. And I've been rereading his book on Manstein, his book on Manstein, the great German general, to get a second-hand feeling for what the battles were like in the Ukraine and Stalingrad and Kursk and these other places and the Crimea in the 1940s, in the 1939-45 war. And that's been quite interesting to revisit that. Which I haven't done since my college days. But it did actually prompt my hypothesis, which is on this particular thesis that I wrote, which is on the war aims and economic consequences for the United Kingdom. Just to sort of get a holistic position here on actually how major global warfare goes. And how does it move forward? How does all this happen? And of course, it's a lot more than tactics or battlefield tactics, which is what some people don't understand. And why would they understand it if they haven't been trained in it? Now, here we have this situation, which is the problem. If we wanted to, when I say we, I mean NATO, because I was a member of NATO and 4th Armoured Division, so on and so forth, although NATO now, of course, has changed its spots and it's become aggressive, not defensive. If you want to fight a war, a big world war, or if you will, you have to have an inherent strategic advantage in some form. And this is why, one of the reasons why the Germans lost the 1939-45 war, and indeed the Great War, 1914-18, is because it's extremely difficult to fight a war on a long distance basis. And this is what would naturally have to happen if we involved ourselves with boots on the ground in the Ukraine. The logistics supply line is too long. You would have to bring weaponry, armor, shells, explosive, all the things that you need to fight a modern war would have to come from too far away, mainly America. So it would have to cross. It would have crossed the Atlantic, and it would have to find its way all the way into the Ukraine. That really isn't a runner. That really isn't going to happen because, and there's a number of reasons for that. In particular, though, and Colonel McGregor made this point in my interview with him, and I think it bears repeating. Great Britain and America are fundamentally sea powers and air powers. They are not military powers. They're not army-style powers in the main. And that's certainly true of today. And of course, historically, that's always been true of Great Britain. Have always been a maritime power. So we're not equipped to fight huge land battles in the Ukraine, even if we wanted to. And I've heard some chaps, I've heard senior generals, how they get there, I don't know. I've heard chaps on the Defence Committee in the House of Parliament say, we need to start gearing up and sorting ourselves up for a potential war with Russia. This is so stupid, it's unbelievable. I mean, they've got something like 100 divisions. It's massive. They've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of men. Our British Army at the moment stands at something like 80,000 tops, and half of those at least aren't combat troops. And we don't have anywhere near the armour, artillery or anything. So even the Russians would just laugh. They go, oh, my goodness me. This is ridiculous. So it's all brave talk from armchair generals. It's all brave talk. And of course, you've got your 4 stars, of whom there are hundreds in Washington, 4-star generals. Goodness knows how they get to be 4-star generals. They've got about 6 times more 4-star generals than they had in 1944. Don't ask me how that works, but there we are. All saying that we can do this and we can do that, and we just can't. And rather than involve ourselves any further, we need to put our geopolitical, historical, intellectual shoulder behind getting a peace, a lasting peace, and fixing it for long term, and actually also withdraw a little bit NATO from this perpetual warfare all over the world in expansion. And hundreds and hundreds of overseas NATO bases and American bases, which is simply upsetting the rest of the world. All the BRICS countries are now saying fed up with this, and it's leading to de-dollarization and so on and so forth. So we've got to sit down and negotiate sooner or later. And the sooner that we negotiate, and in good faith, because at Minsk we didn't negotiate in good faith, and that's why the Russians don't trust us, and they're right not to trust us. We have to sit down and negotiate in good faith. That cannot be the current administration. That cannot be the current American administration, which has lost all credibility, and all those senior people at NATO, they need to go as well. Otherwise, the Russians aren't going to sit down. They're just going to tell us exactly how it's going to be, and we're just going to have to lump it. We are desperate for some common sense and some compassion to come into this totally unnecessary and criminal war, which didn't need to happen. NATO doesn't need to exist. The Warsaw Pact countries collapsed. The Soviet Union has collapsed. What we need to do is start trading and talking with each other. That's what we need to do, or we're just going to lose hundreds of thousands of more young men for no good reason. As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research-based, and I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I automatically share it with you. So surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.